Hi, I'm Manny Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington Realtors legal hotline lawyer. Welcome back to our video series entitled DB's Wishlist.
My question to you is, how best can a buyer broker document that their buyer is relying on money from the Washington State Bond Down Payment Assistance Program for their buyer? These are contingent funds. How best can the buyer broker document that in a purchase and sales agreement? Thank you.
Okay, let's set the table for what's happening in this transaction. The buyer is relying on not only a traditional loan, probably an FHA loan, but also Washington State bond money. And Washington State bond money is not traditional financing, but buyer still has to qualify for the bond program. Buyer may or may not get the Washington State bond money. So buyer brokers, when you write the offer, you have to treat the state bond money, just like the FHA loan, as contingent sources of funds. And based on Form 21, paragraph A, buyer must disclose buyer's reliance on obtaining both the traditional loan and the state bond money. So this question is asking, how do we disclose buyer's reliance on the state bond money? There's two ways of doing it, but one is far superior to the other. The way that I don't recommend you disclose buyer's reliance on the state bond money is to use a Form 22EF. If you were going to do that, buyer would include the Form 22A and identify their traditional loan, FHA probably, and separately on a Form 22EF, evidence of funds addendum, buyer would disclose that they're relying on state bond money. The problem with doing it that way, you've got to remember what Form 22EF is. It is not a contingency addendum. It is an addendum that discloses buyer's reliance on contingent funds, a source of contingent funds. But it doesn't create a contingency. To the contrary, when buyer includes a Form 22EF, buyer assures seller, buyer promises seller that buyer will have those contingent funds by closing, to the point that buyer is in breach if buyer doesn't have that contingent source of funds. So to use the 22EF to disclose buyer's reliance on state bond money would be very risky. If for some reason buyer were going to do that anyway, buyer brokers, you need to make sure that in the paragraph where there's a paragraph that says blank number of days prior to closing, buyer will provide proof that they have the contingent funds. You need to make sure that that blank said 0, because buyer won't have that proof prior to closing. Okay, what is the better way of buyer disclosing reliance on state bond money? The better way is to identify both the traditional loan, probably the FHA loan, and the state bond money on the Form 22A. So buyer would fill out their Form 22A, they would identify the FHA loan as the loan they're obtaining, and they would also mark the box for other. And on the other blank, they would write Washington State bond money. And with that, buyer now has a contingency based on buyer's ability to obtain both the traditional financing and the state bond money. And if buyer is unable to obtain either, buyer is not in breach. Rather, buyer would have a legal excuse for failing to perform the terms of the agreement. If you have questions on this topic or any other, send an email to me, legalhotline@warealtor.org. Thank you for being a Washington Realtors member.